Hey everybody, P.J. Turner, executive producer and host of your Break It Down show, doing today's intro for our episode with Peter Jang. Peter Jang is a stuntman, a director, a screenwriter, an entrepreneur because he has his own company called Simplicity Pictures. The dude is busy. He acts, stunts, does it all. Like, he's just a one-man shop, and he's really... it's great to talk to him, especially in this time with COVID, driving everybody a bit crazy. But here's someone who's just every day working, making his dream a reality. And it's a great conversation. Hey, and joining us as co-host and co-producer on this episode is Jeff Calhoun. He is the best-selling author of The Guide for Every Screenwriter. As we're all going through this time and we're all home, I'll have a screenwriting episode or a movie or something like that in our head. Hey, get Jeff's book, The Guide for Every Screenwriter, and I think there's a link in the episode. You will get walked through step by step. I highly, 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 highly recommend that you do that if you're in any way interested or anyone in your life is interested in screenwriting. Let's get back to Peter. Peter is fantastic. He talks about the American dream, which we all support around here. His dad said, you know what? I'm smart. I want opportunities. He came to the U.S. with $5 in his pocket, and look out. And now Peter follows in his footsteps. Hey, a couple things. We are proud to continue to make the Break It Down show get bigger and better. Oh, I should say also, Dan Crenshaw is going to come on today. We're going to do Dan Crenshaw on Saturday. So if you had that time earmarked Saturday, I'll get you the specific time as soon as he and I get together and figure it out. He's a busy, busy dude. Got a book dropping, got a COVID crisis, got a representative, tasks for Congress. He's a busy guy. So we'll get Dan on this weekend. One more thing about the Break It Down show: share, support, like, comment. All of these things are great. We're going to add some more content and some more products to the Break It Down show website. So go there and let us know what you think. And as always, I'm always interested in what you have to say. Pete@breakitdownshow.com. That's how you get going for that. All right, one final thing. And this is what I'm going to say to you. We have a strong charitable charter here at the Break It Down show, and our favorite charity is called Save the Brave. SaveTheBrave.org is where you go to contribute. You can click on the donation tab and put a small amount of money in each month. It means a lot to us to be able to help veterans like myself who have PTSD, like myself, try to get them some fellowship, get them some community, get them some purpose. So hopefully we can get them to want to stay alive. And that's the God's honest truth. All right. So with all of that said, hey, everybody, hang in there. The COVID time is going to end. Hopefully here in a couple of weeks, we'll be sort of back to normal. And if not, I've got 5 shows a week for you. Let me know how I can help. Let me know who you got that you want for a guest. I get guests for fans and for listeners of the show all the time. So let me know what you think. All right. Here comes Peter Jang. Take care, everybody.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Morata.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hi, this is Peter Jang from Simplicity Pictures, and you're listening to the Break It Down show.
Yeah, Peter Jang coming on. Not our first stuntman, certainly not our first writer, director, Hollywood type, but always good to add someone new to the list, and I can't wait to chat with them. Oh, and by the way, joining me today is big fancy screenwriter and author of a smash book is Jeff Calhoun. Jeff, tell us the name of your book so everybody who's into screenwriting or thinks they might be can go on to Amazon and buy it.
Hey, Pete, thanks for having me on. It's great to be here again. It's the guide for every screenwriter.
And let me just tell you guys something. Seriously, anybody in your family's like, oh, I like to get into screenwriting. Spend the less than $10 and get them the book. Or even better, if I've still got a couple, email me and then I will send you one because I have some and I want you guys to read the book. Hands down, best screenwriting book I've ever read, Jeff. And so big ups to you for doing this. And I wanted to take the time to shout out. Now we're going to ignore you and your accomplishments, although they are considerable. And let's talk to Peter. Why don't you tell us why we're having Peter on, and we'll go from there.
We are having Peter on today because he is, an actor, a stuntman, and a screenwriter. Pretty much an amazing, talented guy, and I think he's somebody that we need to get on here and really dive into what he does.
That's awesome, Peter. You're doing it. I mean, how long have you been working in Hollywood in the film industry?
10 years now. Yeah, that doesn't seem like it was that long ago. So a full decade now. I started. I moved. I'm actually originally from Columbus, Ohio, and then I went to school in San Diego, and I made my way up to LA about 10 years ago. Yep.
Yeah. So the 10-year overnight success. If you would have told yourself 10 years ago that this is where you would be, making short films, getting gigs on Westworld. I mean, this is when someone who has never acted or never had a job. Holy shit! Like that would be amazing. But how amazing is it for you now? Do you feel like there's still so much more for me to accomplish to get to the next level? Kind of give us a sense for looking back and then also looking forward.
Well, coming from Ohio, I mean, I always thought it was kind of like winning the lottery, really. You walk down the street and then, Steven Spielberg puts his fingers up and says, "Oh my God, you're going to be a star. Here's $1 million. Meet me at the studio tomorrow." But so it is very surreal, ever since the first day, 10 years ago to now, every time I walk on set, every time I walk into a studio or even into an audition room, I mean, I feel so humbled and so grateful for being able to do it. I never thought that it was actually a real career for one. I always thought, it's just the lucky ones that, get picked out of the ether. But once I got to LA and I was actually working as at a market research firm as a business development specialist, once I found out, I was like, oh, well, you can actually work at this and you can actually put the time in and, learn the craft. And it was something that I was immensely interested in. Ever since I was a young boy, going to movies with my parents and just making little movies. I was actually a little filmmaker when I was in school. I didn't even really realize until I started working a little bit. And I was making little commercials and short films and all that kind of stuff in school just for fun with my friends and whatnot. And then now to be able to do it professionally and be paid for it, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. I kind of joke with some of my colleagues sometimes that, last 2 years ago, I went to New York and I went for my friend's bachelor party, actually. And we had a fun time and everything. And I was just like, you know what, I'm going to stay and, I'm going to meet the people here and just like train a little bit, see what happens. And then I ended up working on The Punisher, that Marvel TV show.
That's awesome.
That was on. And I was just joking around. I was like, if I would have gone to New York, 5 years ago and somebody said, hey, give me $1,000 and then you can be on this TV show, I'd be like, take my money. Where do I go? I'll be there now. And then now people are paying me this money. And it's crazy, and not to mention, working on some of the shows that I'm actually a big fan of, it is very surreal.
So, was The Punisher, was that the first gig that you got for stunt, or was there a moment when you kind of knew this I want to do?
Oh, well, no, my first gig, my first official gig, it was like a no name like movie that came out a long time ago. And I did it for free. I hope nobody watches it. I didn't really know what I was doing. And then all of a sudden, but I'm like, hey, this is fun. This is something I can do on the weekends. I was still working my other job. And I started doing, actually, it was even before that. When I was in college, I did extra work on a TV pilot that never got picked up. But I'm sitting there in Ocean Beach, California, down near San Diego, and right next to the pier, beautiful sunset. They're picking us out of a lineup and like, okay, you're gonna stay. I'm sitting in this hotel, like kind of like watching movies, but then every once in a while going out, like, because that's the holding area, and then going out and then like just walking in front of the camera. I mean, it was a really simple job, but kind of gave me a taste of like, oh, well, this is kind of like a little bit of what it's like to shoot these kind of TV shows. And then when I moved up to LA and I started seeing what the actual industry was like and the kind of work that you can put in to make it work, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. My father was an entrepreneur. He owned an engineering firm growing up, and he came from Taiwan, back in the 70s, and created his American dream and put me through college and everything like that. So I got to see that firsthand, creating that American dream for yourself. When I went into college knowing like I want to start my own business. I don't really know what it is yet and whatever. Been doing martial arts my whole life. I was the national champion a couple of times. So, cool. When I started seeing like, okay, well, I can use the skills that I have and I can learn new skills and I can create a business, which is something I've been training for with my economics degree. I can put all these things together, and it just kind of seemed like a perfect storm of perfect of all of my interests lining up.
You know, you're talking about this American dream concept, and I love this because we often get this belief that somehow America hates immigrants, hates taking long shots, you know, and that people that say, I'm leaving my home country, Taiwan, the Philippines, Mexico, wherever it is, so many places, and they come here and then they'll be damned if they're not going to make it. I think we love these stories. Do you feel like with where you're at now, like you literally can just outwork 95% of your problems because you're here in America? I mean, look, starting an engineering firm, I don't want to in any way minimize that because holy shit, that's incredible and impossible. But even more impossible in my head is a Hollywood career where, you know, you're acting, you're doing stunts, you're writing, you're getting things produced. That shit, no one picks that path if they know how hard it is. Talk a little bit about the American dream and then the impossible nature. Like every movie that gets funded and made is impossible, right? Because most of the ideas die.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, well, first off, you know, since we're talking about this, I definitely talk about my father. You know, he came out here to America. He didn't really speak very much English. And, you know, with an engineering firm, you know, the reason why he was able to be successful is because he is literally a genius. You know, like I said, he didn't really speak very much English. He came out here on a scholarship to Ohio State University. And then within 9 months got his master's degree and published in the National Journal for Engineering. So, wow. I mean, I think that was, you know, listening to that when I was younger, and I was saying like, okay, well, he just worked really hard. He obviously is very talented and smart at what he does, but I never saw him take a day off. I never saw his mind wander anywhere. So I was like, I knew for myself, I need to find something that I'm that passionate about and something that I want that much where I don't feel like I have to work. Because on the one hand, you know, yeah, I work very hard and I'm very passionate about what I do, but I almost feel like really in a lot of ways, I'm not that, like, I'm actually a little bit lazy sometimes, and I'm a little bit all this kind of things, but I can counteract that just because I am so obsessive about film that, like, even though my lazy nature kind of brings me one way, it doesn't even come across my mind when it comes to film, when it comes to writing, when it comes to directing, when it comes to stunts or training or anything like that, just because it is something that like it lights a fire inside of me so hard that, you know, it makes me want to do it. And, you know, like you said, it's next to impossible to bring like this idea that you have to life, you know. And then actually tomorrow I have a screening at the Grauman's Chinese Theater for my short film. And just this idea that I had 2 years ago where I'm like, okay, well, I think I have this idea for a cool fight, and I have this idea for a cool story. I wanted to talk about, you know, modern warfare and, you know, what my take on it in the world, and like how, you know, soldiers are kind of sacrificed for the whims of certain people. And then all, you know, fast forward later on, just through, you know, sheer just will and my talented friends and a lot of luck, you know, I'm able to show it on the big screen at Grauman's, you know, at the Chinese Theater in Hollywood. I mean, it's crazy, you know. And when we talk about the American dream, and, you know, when I was younger, my father, you know, he didn't just own that. He didn't just start that
he didn't stop
firm. He
there.
Also owned a Chinese. What's that?
He didn't stop there. You're like, now I'm going to take days off because I've made it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he actually owned a Chinese restaurant, you know. Something that really stuck with me when I was younger, because I would go into this restaurant and like I would help out, you know, wash dishes and whatever. It was a family restaurant, but, you know, he would talk about, you know, it's like in the back there are like dishwashers and these chefs and all these different things, that they're all immigrants. And my dad would just point out, I was like, look at this guy. He comes in every day. He has no education. He came with $5 in his pocket, and he is working his ass off every day in the kitchen so that he can put his kids through college. So he can buy a car, he can buy a house, and he can make a better life for his family. And then he would point and look at, he's like, and now look at this other guy over here who was born here, and he never, like, he had a good family growing up. He had all of the right, like, opportunities for education, and he squanders it because it's just too much excess, I guess, and what it is. So, I mean, like, and that always stuck with me, that really it's like, it's not so much about your circumstances as it is your drive and what you're willing to put into it to make your dreams come true. So
I love that.
I keep that for myself, and I keep that for my business, and the way that I run my business is that I want to make sure that if I'm going to fail, which I know at some points I'm going to fail, is not going to be because I didn't try hard enough.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. Because the way I look at screenwriting is I look at it as a business. I look at it as commercial. I don't necessarily look at it as art. And I think when you have that kind of commercial mindset, you're driven to really succeed. I always talk about time, talent, and tenacity, right? And I mean, you are literally, Peter, the living embodiment of that. And when I look at you and I see a guy who's been putting in a decade of hard work, and it's showing. I mean, it says, Gladwell says it takes 10 years to really master something. And I got to say, you're at the top of your game. But you've been through a journey. And I had a little chuckle to myself when you said, oh, I'm a little lazy here and there. And I'm like, are you though? Or is it just that you're working so hard that you just got to take a breather and maybe, binge watch a show on Netflix or something?
Hey man, that's work actually.
Yeah.
It's all research.
That's right. Write it off on your taxes.
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing, it's like some people that I always thought it was really weird whenever I hear people, it's like, oh, I don't watch TV. I'm just like, I mean, that's kind of like a writer that says they don't read,
Yeah.
It's like, or, it's like, and I'm talking about performers, or, just people who are like, I make art just for me or something like that. I'm just like, well, if you're making it just for you, then A, you're a hobbyist, and B, it's like, well, then why aren't you just putting it into your living room and not trying to show anybody? I mean, you can't say that and then tell me that, and then all of a sudden also say like, oh, but check out my blank. I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way. Like, are you making it for people, or are you making it for yourself? What are you trying to say, and what kind of impact are you trying to have?
I mean, it's so true. Usually when you find the type of creator that's making it for them, I mean, they don't want feedback. They don't want it to be better or improved or be the best version. They want it to be what they want it to be. But when we're in, a field like this, it is collaborative. There's a great quote that when you write a screenplay, it's an it's an invitation to create art. And I always like that a lot because it shows how many people you need to bring into the process. But over your 10 years, I'd want to ask you if you have any moments, any like make or break moments. Because I think about my path in screenwriting, and I know I had a couple of low moments where I was like, I just don't know if I can do this. And there's going to be people listening to this, young men or women that are going to want to follow, your path and do what you're doing. And they might be in the middle of that moment. And if you have a moment where you're like, I just don't know if I can do it, and then you had to kind of dig deep and move on.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say that I have those, actually almost every year, I have that, and I say I've been doing the industry for about 10 years, but, but I always tell people I have 4 separate careers that I'm doing. I have my stunt career, I have my acting career, I have my writing career, and I have my directing career, right? So as far as writing and directing, I mean, that's relatively new for me. I would say I've been spending the last 5 years on that, but within this industry, that's still relatively new, and especially with screenwriting, it's like I've written a lot of things and I've produced a lot of my own stuff, but I still consider myself a novice when it comes to all that kind of stuff. And I think that part of that comes from my I think that's going to be the rest of my life, because I think part of that comes from my martial arts training. Something that my Taekwondo teacher would always say is always have a beginner's mind. Like no matter what you do, no matter where you go in life, always have this idea in your head that you don't know anything and you want to keep learning.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you don't have that forever student mindset, you stop growing, you stop learning, and it will show in your work, because you'll be right. Your writing will be out of date. It won't be as interesting or heartfelt. And I just want to say this for anybody listening to this, for Peter as a quote novice screenwriter, has had an incredible career as a screenwriter. He's won several prestigious awards in the field. He's exceptionally humble. I want to say that first and foremost. But he's done some really great stuff, and I'm excited for him. And I know it's only going to be up from here for what you're creating. And tell me about the moment when you decided to start screenwriting, because you went into acting, you went into stunt, and that I've done some stunt work. I had a crash course from the great Mario Roca. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, guy's amazing, and I had to learn how to take a punch, and Tizito Garcia was throwing punches at me, and then the one take that they use is the one where I actually got hit.
Of course.
So, yeah, that was the best take, but I have a deeper appreciation for what you guys do, because it is so exceptionally difficult. But I want to hear your path on screenwriting. Like, when did you decide to start taking that on? Because it's totally different.
It's actually a very strange thing. My sister actually she's not a screenwriter. She creates comic books. She's a writer and publisher of graphic novels. It's called Red Stylo Media. If anybody's interested, really great stories. But she was kind of like an inspiration for me to write when I was very young. And I didn't even realize this, but like when I was in college, I was writing stories, like short stories, and then I was writing a lot of different things. And I've been writing stories my whole life. I don't know why they always just come up in my head, and I can't help but put them down. And then I didn't realize what I was doing, but I actually wrote a film treatment.
Oh, really? That was fantastic.
Yeah. I was just like, I have this idea for a movie. I want to do it. And I started writing a treatment. And then it's one pet project that I really want to make. I actually talked to you about one of them. The one about the internet singularity thing. I think we had a little consultation about.
Interesting sci-fi concept. Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually something I had come up with in college. And, it's something that, I definitely still want to pursue in the future, but it's such a large scale that I feel like I need to take my steps towards it, make my progress in the proper way. But yeah, I mean, when it came to actually screenwriting, I for some reason, right when I started out, I was just like, well, because I had always been writing, I wrote like a little short thing that I did with my girlfriend at the time. It was pretty bad. I think I have it somewhere. But
they're always bad the first time, but you get that bug, and you're like, how do I make this suck less? And then you kind of go down. Yeah, absolutely. I get it.
But and a lot of it was too starting off as an actor, because since I didn't really know much about the industry, coming into it, I was just like, well, acting was it's the face of every project. So, I was just like, oh, well, I started studying acting, but then I also started noticing that there's not really a lot of parts for people that look like me. I'm a multi-ethnic person. And even if it is an ethnic part, they want it to be a pure race part. You have to be Chinese, you have to be Japanese, you have to be Mexican.
That is definitely.
And since I'm not any one particular thing, there's not a lot of room for somebody that looks like me. And now, recently we have had some people like Daniel Henney, who I was stunt double for on Criminal Minds Beyond Borders and Criminal Minds for a number of years, and then also Louis Tan, a friend of mine that he's doing amazing in the industry right now. He's forging his own thing, but it's like save for a few of these exceptions to the rule, like for the most part, most of your parts are white or black or Hispanic. And not a lot of in between, So for me, seeing that, I was just like, well, I could sit here and I could try to make, I could try to make it, quote unquote, through the system, and nothing to discount Louis at all, or Daniel, but Daniel was a very high profile model for a long time and huge in Korea. And then, Louis Tan, his father was in the industry, so he kind of grew up in the industry. Like I said, they're both amazing hard workers and amazingly talented. So not to take anything away from them, but it's also not to say that some of those things can be advantages. So, and since coming into it, not knowing anybody, not having anything, and not looking like anybody that did anything, I was just like, well, I need to make my own things. I need to create my own products, and that includes screenwriting and directing and just filmmaking in general. Because if I don't do that, then I don't know how long it's going to take, and I don't know if I'm going to lose my youth.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you brought this up. Obviously, I need that perspective on the industry. And do you feel that the industry in general is improving, or is it still kind of just going in that lateral direction?
Oh yeah, no, it is improving a lot, and there are huge strides being made
Yeah.
in diversity in Hollywood, and I applaud that so much. But on the other hand, it is kind of like, for somebody that is a mixed race, it almost can be sometimes a little bit of a detriment, just because now it's almost like you have to be more pure.
Oh,
It's like,
is that right?
If you're a half Asian person, they don't want to hire you as a full Asian person.
I had never even considered that. That is, wow. Yeah, well, so I can understand now why you would be driven to write your own stuff. The other thing, and hopefully things will continue to get better and improve as people evolve, is the term I've been hearing lately, and hopefully that will change within the industry. I know when I write, I try not to write for race at all. I like to leave it nice and open, so that way if they have a particular actor that they like, they can just cast them and not kind of be married to that whole concept.
Well, I feel like a lot of that also comes down to logistics, because it's not so much that there's nefarious people twiddling their mustaches saying like, "Oh, I only want a certain race." I don't think it's like that, really. It's just like, since it has been a certain way for so long, and the training has been in place, and culturally, in different races, it's not always a feasible career path for people. So it's hard to say, like, art itself, like through hundreds of years, usually art and philosophy was relegated to people either who were dirt poor and just did it and stayed poor their whole life, and then found infamy at some point, or they were super rich and they had the time to spend on it. So up until recently, those two worlds kind of converge, and then now you can have middle class people starting to do it, and that was like a recent thing. But then those kind of like middle class things, I mean, if you really look at the history of America, where film like originated really in a large way, at least the industry of it. Who's at the forefront of that? It's going to be your white, your Caucasian people, and it's also going to be Black people and Hispanic people, because that's the majority of the population. So I don't know. It's not really so much of a nefarious plan that's in place. It's just like you say, like, you don't write with that in mind, and you shouldn't.
I strive hard not to.
Yeah, but it's there. It's like a supply and demand thing. The supply is there, but the demand is there. But then the supply of people who have the proper training, who have the proper time, and have the proper circumstances to have all of those things, it is relegated to certain pockets of racial dynamics, just because that's just how it's been so far. But as the world is progressing, and as different racial groups things are getting a little bit better for different racial groups, I do see that changing. And especially with the rise of China as a film market.
Yeah, they're a powerhouse.
Yeah, we're going to see a lot more Asian faces in film, especially with Parasite winning this year. I mean, that's huge.
I know, that's a big deal.
Introducing the world audiences to different kinds of faces, I think, is going to be paramount.
I think, I mean, whitewashing is real. It's ugly. It's real. And I'm glad that the industry is slowly evolving past it. And eventually we'll just make more and more progress. The one thing I really find interesting is streaming.
Mm-hmm.
Streaming, you get a lot of foreign films. I mean, I have more exposure to foreign film now on streaming than I have ever had in the past.
Oh, yeah.
So I get, Korean dramas are fascinating, and there's some Brazilian shows out there that are just killing it. Brazilian sci-fi, for some reason, is amazing. And so I think streaming helps a lot as well, so that we're not so constrained in the bubble that we're used to. But man, I really appreciate your perspective on this.
Well, I mean, the sharing of information, I am so excited for the world in general, and not just film. The film, it really is just a reflection of the world, right? I mean, that's what film is. It's a reflection of the world and the imagination of the people in it. So, and as the world gets interconnected, I am so excited to see where the world is going.
Hey, this is P.A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here. And if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it.
you know, and as the world gets interconnected, I am so excited to see where the world is going, just in general, as far as technology, culture, and people. Just because now it is so hard to hide atrocities, it's so hard to hide,
that's so true.
you know, hide failures and also it's really hard to hide triumphs. You know, and that is the most important thing I see, is that it's really hard to hide nowadays when somebody in South America or Asia or Africa or Europe does something amazing, and then people might try to suppress it in the past, and there's only a certain amount of media outlets that could do it. But now you have the internet; they can put it somewhere, and then people can find it. You know, but on the other hand, it is a little bit scary too, just because on that same note, these fringe, weird kind of like some good, some bad things, they also find audiences, and they also find, you know, people. So maybe, you know, only 1% of the population of the world really hates really hates like liberty.
Yeah.
You know, just like to speak generally. Well, that 1% across 7 billion people, that's what 700 million people. So I mean, that's a lot of people, you know, but they're all spread around the world, and now they can find each other though. So that is one thing that's a little bit scary. But on the other end, you know, there's a lot more people who love.
Well, I think it's a really good question. I actually want to ask Pete about this, because I don't know if you know this, but Pete was a spy, and I was wondering, Pete, do you think that the negative voices have the loudest voices, even though they're the smallest population? What's your opinion on that?
I think, yes, they have the loudest voices, but they're very peaky because it's salacious, it sells, it creates, a reaction, right? I always talk about affect over effect. And so if we can careen in the news from crisis to crisis, like currently it's the coronavirus. 5 years ago, it was clowns. You know, and it's stuff that's just ridiculous. Like, and I'm not trying to undermine, like, look, the corona problem is real, but we have no context with, we were talking about this off mic, you know, the flu. How many people have the flu, and which the flu is it, and how lethal is it? We're just saying, oh my God, here it comes. Well, the flu is here. We have shots for the flu because the flu can kill you, you know? So instead of talking, and this is why I love doing the show, is that we can get into these things. So when we have these negative voices that scream out, yeah, they gather a little bit of distractive sensation. But I think overall the trend is what matters more. And it's that, look, as a society, we're not bimodal, we're not left, we're not right. And we're very global. You know, we are a place that welcomes in, people from other countries. That's reality. And all of the immigrant stories, we all have one. We all know someone that has one. And that's really what matters, is that trend towards, you say whitewashing, I would say whitewashing's less and less. You know, anybody can produce content now for fractions of the cost of a studio. And when the studio is like, whatever that guy or that person is doing, we want more of that. Let's get that person some money. You can still make your way. It's a totally different way. But, yes, those negative voices are out there in everything. But what really matters gets back to what you said earlier, that tenacity. You know, I think about, and I say all the time, I'm going to outwork my problems. You know, there's no problem that I cannot outwork. It might take me a long time. I might have to make incremental change. I might have to improve myself to get through that problem, which again comes through that tenacity and just keeping getting after it. But yeah, the negative voices, I just don't put much stock into it. I don't put much stock into getting, in fear of the next superstorm that's coming. Remember back when storms were just storms? Now it's like, It's a polar bomb.
They got to have a name now.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, that's my thought on that is, okay, yes, there is calamity in life. There will be another earthquake here in Southern California, but we're resilient. We're resilient. We're going to deal with it. We're going to continue to go forward. And what matters is those people that just continue to do the work that it takes to get things done. And I think about Zach Ward when I say this. Zach Ward was Scott Farkas in Christmas Story, right? And you would think, well, that guy's not done anything since. You'd be wrong, because he's done nothing but learn about the industry, and he's an absolute master. He's been at it. He's a legacy kid because his mom, I think, was in soaps. And so now you have this guy that just knows this industry in and out, and he chooses what he wants to do and works on what he's passionate about. But just because you didn't know about it doesn't mean he wasn't doing it and he wasn't incredible at it, right?
Yeah, I think that's great.
Let me ask you a question, Peter, about the ethnicity thing that you're talking about, because this is fascinating to me. One of my friends, a common friend with Jeff and I, is Hilliard Guess. He's been on the show a bunch of times, and he's also a writer. He works at the lot and does all kinds of projects. And from listening to his show, Screenwriters Rant Room, everybody should listen to that. I've learned to retrain my brain in a couple of ways. One, I think obviously as white male characters, I'm a white male dude, but I also go, okay, now how do I bring in some diversity? How do I bring in some spice into my story by now I think about Danny Trejo in this part of the story, or whoever it is. And then I realized I think in three colors. I think about white, Mexican, and black. And that's it. And so now I have to go, okay, there actually are Asian folks, there's Turkish folks, there's Egyptians, and these people all live around us. You go to southern Florida, I can't tell you how many different countries you can experience in a day. And yes, most of them speak Spanish, but go ahead and say they're from the wrong country and they'll let you know instantly what they are, you know? So talk a bit about how you've had to develop your brain when you tell these stories, because I'm sure it's easy for you to tell stories that in your head are like the people that are around you. But talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Well, for me, you know, I always kind of joked about this, that you know, I see it with Asian culture just because, or Asian filmmaking, just because I'm half Asian, so I guess that's the majority of me. But even though like I'm also a lot of other things, you know, as far as ethnicity wise, but I see it like, you know, a lot of times, even Asian filmmakers, when they put an Asian character in their film, they're going to make them eat with chopsticks, talk about their tiger mom, and, you know, and talk about like, you know, traversing the ocean or something like that. I mean, something like that shows like, oh, look, I'm Asian, you know? But one thing that I've really appreciated, and I always try to do in my work, is just make people and that happen to be whatever, you know. So I've appreciated some people like Stephen Yeun and Daniel Henney, you know, who play these characters like in Criminal Minds, or in with Stephen Yeun, it was in The Walking Dead, who yes, they were Asian, and you see that on, you know, all over their face, obviously, but like nothing about their character says that they're Asian, just because, you know, that's who they are. You know, I don't. And I think it's kind of like a normal thing that, you know, people tend to write about, you know, what they know. And most people, they think they know themselves. So therefore they write characters that are similar to themselves, or people that are either in their family or whatever. And it's hard to write for other people. But, you know, and I think that especially, I think that it's changing now, but it seems that in the world, you know, this kind of separation of cultures and people has like, it's been, you know, tried to like say like, well, a Mexican person has to be spicy, and they have to, you know, talk fast, and they have to, you know, be, you know, whatever, they have to be a certain way, or an Asian person has to be really smart, and they have to be blah, 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 right? Or a black person has to be really stylish, and blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, but at the end of the day, it's just like there is a huge array of flavors of every different person and every different race, right? And it's just the only different part of them is the melanin in their skin, and maybe the culture that they grew up in. You know, and that definitely shapes how people are. But I think that's changing. That's changing more and more as the times go. As different countries are becoming more similar in the way that they live. You know, it's not just different cultures within America that are living similarly, but different countries. Like if you go to China and you live in Beijing or Shanghai, yes, it in a lot of ways it's very different, but in a lot of ways it's very much the same kind of life as it is in America, as it is in Europe, as it is in South America. You know, these like, you know, if you live in a city, you live in a city, right? Yeah. So, and a lot of times, and I really find, for me, finding those kind of similarities in the way that these different countries and people and cultures, like the similar ways that they are much more fascinating to me than what makes them different, and like what makes them quote unquote have their flavor, right? So like say in Parasite, I think that one of the most powerful things about Parasite is that it takes place in Korea, but you can see how similar the social dynamics and the hierarchy of society is when you look at Parasite and the way that the rich people versus the poor people are interacting with each other. it's almost exactly the same as in America, how the rich people and the poor people are interacting with each other, which is why it was so impactful in the world, right? But then you see movies like I can't. Nothing comes. I don't know why nothing comes to mind right now. But like where they're making this definite difference. Like, well, no, and in China this is how it is, and here that's how it is. It didn't have the same impact as Parasite, and I don't think that's a coincidence. I think what it is that we as people want to see what makes us similar to the people on screen, not what makes us different, right?
I think that's great. I love that perspective. The character happens to be of Asian descent, but they're still who they are. Yeah, I mean, because when we're writing these things, we want it to be, we want them to feel human. So we're trying to create, like I say, imbue your character with struggles that are universal truths, right? So loss, poverty, these are all things that at one point, most people have had to struggle with. And so to have poverty there and to know it personally, you can definitely associate with that. And I think that's a great take on it.
Hey, I want to push you a little bit on this, Peter, and because I know you can take it, and I'm interested in what you have to say. You started that whole last statement talking about Asians and how you identify with that, but I think this is sort of like another unfair thing. Asia is a big place. I'm positive you didn't mean folks from Nepal. You didn't mean Azerbaijanis or Georgians or people from Oman, Qatar.
Or Russia.
Russians, Turks. I've met Turks that are as dark as you can be. Swear to me, look me in the eye and say, I'm white. And what am I going to do with that, right? So again, and you get where I'm going with that. This is not an attack on you, but how do we get past that of just saying Asian, or like we can't use the word Orient or Oriental anymore because we're offended by it, but in reality it means the East, and it really kind of means the Mid-East. So what do we do with
what's funny about
things?
that is that people get offended. Well, people get offended by that, the Oriental thing, but then it's funny because my father, who's Asian, sometimes he'll say it.
Yeah, because it means that you're of the East, Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that a lot of people have been talking about this lately. I've been listening to Joe Rogan podcast a lot lately, and he talks about like the woke culture and everything like that. And in a lot of ways, there's a lot of good things that are happening because of this. And I really don't see it as so much a problem as it is just bumps along the road to improvement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like the idea of woke culture and like saying like, it's like, well, no, you need to say certain words, you need to say a certain way and like that. I mean, like it's been really what's been happening, like at least in America, is that the repression has had the pendulum up here for so long.
Yeah.
Then now when it's swinging the other way, obviously it's going to go the other extreme at first. But then, what does the pendulum always do? It always ends up, falling somewhere in the center, right? And it might take.
It's kind of like political correctness. Yeah, it's like political correctness in the 90s.
Oh yeah, no,
yeah,
exactly. Political correctness or the Me Too movement or any of these things. I mean, obviously they're paramount to the future of where we want to go. I mean, obviously women have not been treated well. Minorities haven't been treated well for a very long time, and it's much better now. And it's getting better, but and part of that getting better is that that there are some people that are going to be extreme about it, and and that's inevitable in any kind of change that ever happens in the world, right? But eventually those people, those extreme voices are going to die out in my mind, and then the extreme voices on the other end are going to die out, and then eventually hopefully it gets catalyzed by the internet and by this interconnectedness that we are all enjoying these days, or not enjoying in some cases. That like because we're so connected now, that these kind of extreme swings, yes, they're here, and yes, they might be here to stay for a little bit, but they eventually will die out because reasonable people aren't always going to want to see it. People are already kind of getting sick of a lot of these different extreme cases of anti-repression kind of like movements that are happening. Yes, minorities and yes, women have been repressed for very long. That is like kind of what's been happening. But at the same time, it's like that's not going to be the way it is forever. It is getting better, whether or not people want to say it is or not. But is it where it needs to be right now? Hell no, of course not. But the road to that is going to be, there's always going to be these extreme voices that say, like it's almost kind of funny, you know, like say in woke culture, sometimes you have people who say like, I want freedom for everybody. Everybody needs to be equal, blah, blah, blah. But then they're saying, you can't say this, you can't say this, you can't say this. So it's like, I am anti-fascist, but I'm going to be fascist about the way that you can talk.
Yes.
You know, it's a little bit opposite of what you're saying. But
I have no tolerance for bigotry. You're like, that's bigoted.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, and which is, you know, in some ways, you know, I'm like, okay, I get it. You know, it is what it is. But at the same time, it's like, are we talking about freedom of speech or are we not talking about freedom of speech, right?
Yeah. Well,
So,
I think the culture that we're in right now, everything is accelerated because everything is easily found, right? When you didn't have the internet, you had to rely on news channels and, you know, talking at the water cooler. But now everything's accelerated because everything takes off like fire. But I wanted to ask you about, you know, what kind of projects do you have coming up right now?
Well, I have 3 short films that are in post-production right now. I'm working on. They're all indie projects, so they're kind of self-funded and you know, with my company right now. But you know, one of them is
Simplicity Pictures. Simplicity Pictures.
Yes, Simplicity Pictures. Right.
Yeah.
You know, I have a drama that's coming out. It is about it deals with PTSD and veteran suicide. So that's a very important project for me that I feel very strongly about. So I'm working on that.
What's that called? Do we have a title for it?
It's called Mask.
I love that. PTSD. That's a great topic to talk about.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, and you know, one thing that I've noticed through has been a common theme in my projects is about trauma. Just because it seems like that's been a common theme of where the world is kind of talking about. I mean, what we were just talking about with say like woke culture and like all these different movements that have been happening. I mean, all of them deal with how the world as a whole are dealing with these past traumas that we've gone through, right? And healing from them. So for me, my projects like this next one, Mask. Also, I have another one coming out. It's an action film called Boss Uzi that. And that also deals with a woman that takes over her father's smuggling ring, but she's been traumatized at a very young age. You know, and you know.
I mean, I think that's great. I think that's great. You're shedding light on that because, you know, I came from a time when you didn't talk about trauma. You had to be very stoic, and nowadays that's starting to shift, and people like mental health is starting to be more approachable of a subject. So I think it's great that. Mask and what was the Boss
Uzi?
Boss Uzi are both talking about trauma. I think because that's something that needs to be said. I think that's great.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, and that's really why I think it's just been a very interesting topic for me in general, and just seeing what's been happening in the world. I mean, the screenplay that I had won quite a few awards with is called Fear. It heavily deals with trauma, not just racial trauma, but also with PTSD and veterans. And also, you know, and also this kind of culture, this interconnectivity of the internet and how it can affect people and how it can make some kids get bullied and how they deal with that trauma.
Fear's done really well, actually. You've taken home quite several awards.
You know, in that one, I'm actually very particularly proud of it. I have found that it. I mean, obviously things are shifting, but you know, not a lot of people want to take a big risk. What they consider as a risk on a new screenwriter for a topic that is so heavy as like racial tensions and what is it called? Bullying, cyberbullying, and
and that's all stuff that needs to be said too. Yeah, unfortunately, it's not a $500 million superhero film, so
exactly.
There's risk. I think you're going to find a market for that script, and I'll tell you why. Because character studies, or what we like to call the low concept films, are going to really start to be prevalent. You're going to start seeing more and more of them come out, especially with the way Joker did. Right, Joker is a character study, and your script is a character study, and so I think the market is going to come around soon, if it's not there already, for what you're putting out there, because that story has a lot that it needs to say.
Right. Well, you know, but on the same note, you know, from what we were talking about earlier, you know, I really don't like waiting for things. Maybe I'm just impatient, but so I'm kind of like, I'm
my
budgeting
tribe
right now, and as I move forward, it's like if I can find people that are interested to make it out, that'd be amazing, and I'm gonna keep trying to push for that and everything like that. But on the other end, like I'm taking the steps and just making it myself.
That's great.
I'm building up my skill. I'm building up my skills as a director and as a writer and as a producer, and I'm making connections. So, if I can't find, say like a bigger studio than mine to make it for me or make it with me, then you know what? I'm not going to wait for the opportunity to come. I'm going to make my own opportunity and just make it. So I have made a basic budget for it, and like I'm just trying to figure out, like, if I were going to shoot it myself, who could I get to do it? What kind of money could I raise? And then, what kind of, where could I get it distributed?
This is one of the reasons why we have you on, Peter, because anybody listening at home, that attitude that you just heard right now come from Peter. I mean, that's the attitude of success. This is somebody who's driven. This is somebody who makes opportunity happen. This isn't somebody who writes a great script and then sits around and is down and out because they don't understand why people aren't making it. He sits there, he sees the value of it, he knows what he can bring to the table. This isn't arrogance, this isn't being cocky, this is somebody who just knows themselves and they can get it to happen. And I'm just going to use my example. I sent my book, I wrote this book, right, because I was doing seminars around the country and people kept asking me, well, do you have a book? And I was like, well, maybe I should write it. So I wrote the book and I sent it out to some big publishers. And they said, there's no market for this book. And I said, you're out of your mind. I am the market for this book. I know exactly the book that people want. And they said, no, it's not going to go anywhere. And so I said, well, then now I have to make it a bestseller. Right. And that's exactly what happened. So, well, so glad to have you on, Peter.
Yeah, it's fantastic, man. That attitude, that you guys just talked about, the doors are locked. Well, I don't need a door.
Where's the crawling through? Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is the door gets opened a lot of times from the inside out. And they're like, hey, what are you doing out here? Get in here. Get inside this club and make these films, because, ultimately you can produce quality. You can produce things that get people's attention. And I'm thinking about Blair Witch Project. No one says this is how we want to shoot an artistically pretty film. They just went out and got that shit done, and they had that thing that got people to pay attention. And sometimes you combine those things where you have quality and you have the magic, and then bam, you rock it right to the front of the line.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a rocky road when it comes to film, but with the new types of interconnectivity that we have, and with also just with the learning tools that are online, just on YouTube or Jeff's book, or there's so many things out there, and there's so many people you can learn from, and there's a community that you can find without without having previously to be in, quote unquote. I mean, like, it's obviously not easy. It's obviously not a given, but it is possible. One thing I like to say, and I think I posted on Facebook a while back, is just like, it's not impossible. You're just impatient.
I love that. Oh, that's a great quote. It's not impossible. You're just impatient. I'm stealing that.
All right. Well, just credit me.
Yeah. Peter Jang. What's the day? Okay.
So let's let folks know where they can find you. Obviously, they can look up Peter Jang and they'll find you. But are you on Instagram, Facebook? Where are you at?
Yeah, you can. I'm most active on Instagram and also Facebook. I haven't built my website yet, but it's in the works. You can also find me on YouTube. So on Instagram, my personal handle is @PeterJangOfficial, and then my Instagram handle for my company, which is actually new. So if you could go there and follow it, it'd be great. It's @Simplicity Pictures Inc. on Facebook. You can find my actors fan page. It's www.facebook.com/actor.peter.jang. And you can also find my my fan page for my company, Simplicity Pictures. It'd be the same thing / simplicity.pictures.inc. No, I think it's just simplicity.pictures. And then also on YouTube, you can look up my page. It's Simplicity Pictures. Same kind of thing. It's a new YouTube page, so there's not a whole lot of subscribers yet, but I just created it and I'm trying to kind of build it. The one thing about indie is that it's always it's a little bit slow moving on finding your fan base, just because the things that are on the algorithm are going to be your big studio stuff first and whatever. So but it's slowly growing and I'm happy with its progress.
Yeah, but for anybody on YouTube, he is exceptionally easy to find. If you want to go to, what was it, Superhero Beatdown or something?
Superpower Beatdown.
Superpower Beatdown.
Yeah, so my friend my friend Aaron Shurka, he is a writer director, amazing filmmaker too, independent filmmaker. His YouTube page is Bat in the Sun. It's wildly popular. I've been on it quite a few times. I'm very proud of the work that I've done on there. I've been in a couple of short films of his, and also a couple of different like fight videos that are high concept videos of like Scorpion versus the White Ranger from Power Rangers, or Ryu from Street Fighter versus the Green Ranger. And I was also a fight choreographer on those short films with Jason David Frank, the original Green Ranger from Power Rangers and whatnot. So his is a great page to look at if you want to take a look at some of my work. But his work is amazing on there. He does a lot of really cool stuff with Batman. He's also doing stuff on Patreon. And Aaron, you're welcome for the plug.
I don't know many other people that got to play Ryu like you and then have a video game character made up.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
Well. So it's pretty sweet. So own that.
Hey, well, listen, I appreciate you coming on. Let's do another one again soon, especially when you have the next project in the works and coming out. Everybody should definitely go follow Peter on YouTube. I've just done it. You'll see me that I've subscribed there. I've also liked Simplicity Pictures and connected with Peter on LinkedIn and Facebook. So be like this Pete and follow that Pete. And man, I appreciate folks that get it. Of course you think you're just going to get plucked. You choose me. But the reality is you can't wait for that hook to grab you out of that machine. You got to get out of that machine yourself through hard work and insistence and just tenacity. So, man, just if nothing else, we all can learn a lesson from that. Whether you're like Brian and you're writing a haiku a day, and that may turn into something, or you're to someone else who's just like, I'm going to lose a pound, every couple of days, whatever it is. Just keep after it. Keep being tenacious. And again, man, thanks for coming on the show.
Of course. Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun, guys.